Hi, thanks for the introduction. So at first I'll start with a brief bird's-eye view of the landscape of research software engineering and some challenges and issues that many of us have observed and faced. And after that I'll present these two tools, but we hope address the situation a bit that can help to improve. So let's look at research software engineering. So I'll borrow a few slides from nice talks I've seen. So this is from here's a seminar, so this is deRSE topic series where Professor Annalena Lamprecht presented. So I like that this is backed by some study that the importance of research and software. So yeah, not surprisingly, most researchers do use some software for their work. To more than 2/3, it's fundamental for their research. And now this is an interesting point. Over half develop their own software. On the contrast, another nice talk I've seen at de-RSE last year is the talk which also summarized some of the problematic aspects of the volatile funding and small team sizes and people fluctuating. So this they call the long tail of science. Basically, the most projects have just a single developer on average, and we don't even know how long the person will stay. So this is a problem. So I don't know, most of you maybe know what the bus factor is. So the bus factor of 1 means if one person is run over by a bus, the project will die. This is not good for science, this is not sustainable. So we should do something about it. We should try to improve the way we do research software to make sure that 10 years from now, maybe a good software that was developed does not decay, can be still used. And well, in this talk, and we agree with this, what can we do about this? It was proposed, well, you should follow follow good practice and achieve technical sustainability by relying on modern and reliable tooling and other things. So we'll see later what we mean by this in our interpretation. But before that, let's look at research software categories, because research software can be many different things. So there are many research centers nowadays have some classification. So it's a table from the Forschungszentrum Jülich, where I'm employed at. There is a similar classification at the DLR. So the smallest scale are personal scripts, and for generating a figure or some in-house use that will never see the daylight of public open source repositories or something. So this is the smallest kind of code, and this is not a big problem because often they're ad hoc, one-shot things, and no one cares too much about what happens later. Then the second category is bigger things that are used in institutes, and these groups and institutes depend on for internal functioning. But again, this is limited scope. Then there are, of course, projects where software is developed with the intent to open it up to collaboration with others, to the world, to make it into an open source project, so it becomes something more responsible. And the final category is, of course, then large-scale complex softwares run for whole institutions. The thing is that all these scales have different characteristics. So at one extreme, the simple scripts are not problematic. As I said, no harm happens if these scripts don't work 10 years from now. On the other extreme, these really system-critical projects are usually not done by PhD students. They are usually done by departments in the institutes with professional developers or from external companies taking care of maintenance and development. So what we are talking about here is this in between. So this is all the software that grows out of institutes, maybe from bachelor, master's thesis, PhD thesis, and maybe developed over years into some kind of community code that becomes something valuable and accepted. And this is the kind of issue that many domains seem to be facing, that how do we make sure that these kind of codes don't perish? So yeah. The thing is that programming is not the same as sustainable software development, because there are many things just learning how to code. You can write some scripts, but to run a community-driven project, it requires a lot more things which involve not just coding, but also project management and process and many things. And to ensure code quality, you need tools and you need CI pipelines, etc., etc. So you need knowledge and experience, which many domain researchers, of course, cannot bring, and maybe are not really interested in learning. That need to make decisions when you set up a project. You need to have an idea where you wanna go, how this should be managed. You need to combine this technological stack to run this project. But yeah, imagine a typical domain scientist who's busy doing research and trying to figure out something about whatever domain he's working in, and now you tell him you should write sustainable software. And yeah, let's be realistic. Does this person has spare time and motivation or experience to make all these choices, do the required research in all these technologies and run this project? Of course not. So like there are 2 points. Most tools on one hand are created by researchers for their own work because only they know what they need. But the other side is their job is not writing software. The software is only incidental for their research to get the results. And we should not and cannot expect that researchers turn into software developers. That's not what they signed up for. They signed up for doing research. And we expect like too much of them maybe by pushing all these things onto them. So we believe that if we want to have better software, we should try to lower the bar and make it easier for them to basically doing it right. Because this is a sea of complexity they need to navigate alongside of their actual work of doing the research. So the tools I'm going to present are basically trying to do exactly that. So let's start with the first thing. This is what we call a fair Python cookie cutter template. So we thought, well, Python is a kind of the language in research used in many domains because it connects also to high performance codes and you can do machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. So Python is obviously trying to cover most territory. And so we assume like you want to start a Python project, you might know some Python coding, know how to write a script for a Jupyter notebook, but you might not know how you could turn some interesting functions and codes into some package, into a library that you can share with others, that others would like to install, something like more professional, right? And this is just a mind map showing this complexity zoo of aspects of technical and non-technical kind, what we think is kind of important when you kind of want to run an open source project. And this template tries basically to bundle up choices in the way we believe is a good setup for starting a new Python project, which ends up with you deploying some library or little CLI or whatever tool. And at the same time is a didactic resource because unlike many other templates, we try to make this as easy as possible by providing lots of documentation, which explains what are the different pieces in this template and where to look further for more information to adapt it to your needs. So of course, we don't say this is the answer, it's one answer. There might be different choices. You might want to change a bit. You might just use it for inspiration. But this is one working setup you can just start running with. And hopefully it is useful to save you weeks or months of learning all these bits and pieces, how to do it right. So this fair Python cookie cutter template is generic, so it's not bound to a certain domain. It's just a skeleton for Git repository that you get for a modern Python project. And we really tried to align it with all the practices that are preached as good practice for software development. And we're also employees of the FAIR metadata collaboration, so we care about good metadata. And you should also care about good metadata because it helps to make your project findable so that other people can try to use your output. So we also aligned with recommendations concerning metadata practices and software development practices. So OpenSSF best practice list is something known also outside of academia. Concerning licensing, like the reuse standard, and there's a tool for checking that your licensing for your code and files in your project are good. There are recommendations from the eScience Center in collaboration with other centers about fair software. There's like a web page, Fair Software EU. So we checked a bunch of recommendations and tried to make sure that you can check all these boxes easily when you start with this template. So what is included in the box is basically everything all the topics mentioned. So you need workflows for development, for checking your code, for dependency management, processes how you should version and release your code. Basically everything set in place that CI runs the tests for you, that documentation website pages generated and can be deployed to GitLab or GitHub. And basically what a special thing is, again, because we are interested in also ensuring good metadata, is we added a tool, the second tool I'll present later, that helps you to set up files in your projects with the recommended metadata that is not specific for programming language and can be harvested by, for example, some database that tries to survey different softwares and research. And maybe you can be part of that if you help a bit by adding a bit of metadata to your project. And as I said, there's a lot of documentation in this template. You can get started. First, you can just take it as it is, but later, if you want to question aspects and change pieces, you look into the configuration, and then you can dive deeper into the tools and learn as much as you need to get what you want to happen, basically. This is some screenshots from the CLI tool. I don't know, maybe if someone was yesterday, we had also a live demo, so my colleague Mustafa was also showing these tools in action, but if you weren't, here's the screenshot. So when you start the tool, you're asked a bunch of questions. It looks scary, but we suggest you first create an empty repository and give it a link, because then it can autofill like half of it. So based on the URL of your repository, you create an empty repo in your GitLab, probably, and it will pre-fill the fields for you. Then it asks you for something like description and search keywords and certain basic things, including also your personal information, your email, ORCID. And later, these things can be also saved, so you just enter them once, and next project you start using the same template, it will also pre-fill even more than before. So we try to minimize the amount of boilerplate that you need to fill out. So again, this red box is all autofilled from the URL, because it's just like the Helmholtz white GitLab instance. It knows what to do, what is the GitLab pages target, where to deploy your website, etc., etc. So you can save these settings for next time, and you just really need next time to basically give it just a new URL, and you're almost done. And what you get out of it is a directory full of directories and files with a skeleton structure for your new Python project. So it includes this basically conventional standard structure. You have a source directory and your Python package. Does it work? So you see the source directory with your package name. You have a docs directory where you can put markdown files from which the website is generated. You have the test directory where you can put your tests. You have in the top level a lot of files, and in the documentation we explain all of them, and some of them are metadata, and there is like code of conduct. You have basically change log, and all these things you can easily forget if you're not a software developer who's used to having these things in his repositories. And this is like screenshots from the website you can get, which is deployed to the GitLab and GitHub pages using modern MakeDocs tool, which is popular for Python, with also documentation for each version. And here we also see screenshots from the pipelines we provide for GitHub and GitLab, so it works for both the same way, basically. So you can choose whatever system you use. It can run the tests and publish to the Python package index if you want. So there is also a demo repository containing all the stuff you can check out. I'll show QR codes in the end. And now, briefly to the second tool. This is called So Messy for software metadata synchronization. So maybe you've noticed in GitHub, on the right in some repos, there's citus repository. And what this is based on is a citation file that you need to place into your repository. And there's actually a GitHub integration. So it's one example. When you have a citation file, GitHub recognizes it and shows like this citation that people can put into their paper to quote. And this is one of the files that is important. But there is a code meta file, and I won't explain why this is important. But they kind of all similar. They kind of have an author in it and different kind of key names, like how you have to break it up, your first names and last names and email, and put them in the right places. And whenever you change this kind of information, if you do it by hand, it is annoying and error prone, because yeah, new people can come and go. The next version needs to come out. You need to bump the version tag. You move the website. Whatever things happen, it needs to be reflected in multiple files. And this is, of course, something no one wants to do by hand. And we did not find a tool that already does that for you conveniently. So we built one and ship it also with the template. But this is not specific for Python. So it automates synchronization from programming language-specific files with metadata in these general recommendation best practice files, and simplifies basically the job. You change it in one place, and all the other files are basically also synchronized with the information that we understand. So you basically have one central TOML file, and it also integrates with some standard files you might care about. It supports multiple target formats, so the citation file I mentioned, code meta, but also you might find your programming language file here. So if you are interested in having good metadata in your software project, but don't want to have too much overhead, maybe look into SoMessy or check out our template. So here are 2 QR codes. You can check out the repositories, talk to me or talk to Mustafa. You can raise your hand if you want. So thanks for your attention.